What's up guys, welcome to a new video, and it is a big one in Scottish history. Now this series even, is called Historical Bangers, but that doesn't mean I agree or think that all these videos are bangers, in the sense of, being a good thing. And this video is horrific, so I don't think it's a banger, it's just the name of my series. But yeah, without further ado, welcome to the Highland clearences. By the early 18th century, the people of the lowlands of Scotland were primarily urbanised and the culture and language was more aligned with England. And such, while the Highlanders spoke mainly Scottish Gaelic or Gaelic and were mostly rural and were seen by some as uncivilised and backwards compared to the Highlanders still used the clan system, which had been in place for years, and I may make a video explaining the way the systems worked and how it came to be. But to sum it up, a clan had one ruling family, and from which the chief was drawn. The land was owned by the chief, and it would be leased from him by tacksmen who rented it to the tenants. With a bit of feudalism in it, the clan system also had military service for the chief who they swore personal allegiance to. Clans would mainly raid neighbouring clans to maintain their way of living. And in 1745, Charles Edward, the Young Pretender, or more commonly known as Bonnie Prince Charlie, led the 5th Jacobite rebellion that the House of Stuart had taken to regain the British throne. Charles won support among the Scottish Highlanders, but it's important to mention they also had support from anyone who was in the UK, English, Irish, Welsh, literally Lowland Scots too. It overall was mainly regaining a Catholic monarchy, so a lot of Catholics in the UK were sympathetic to that cause. So it's not like a Scottish rebellion as like a common misconception, it is like a British rebellion, it's not a Scottish one. It just happened to take place mainly in Scotland. After the heavy defeat at the Battle of Culloden, the Jacobites were crushed and defeated, and in the following weeks and months, some 1,000 Highlanders were hunted and killed. In the process, whole Highland clans were destroyed and or forced to flee. Some prisoners were taken to London, where around 80 were executed, including the last man to be beheaded in Britain, Lord Lovat, clan chief of Fraser. He was beheaded at the Tower of London in 1747 for high treason for his part in supporting the Jacobite rebellion. The Battle of Culloden was to be the swan song of the Highland clan culture, the last stand of a way of life that had existed for centuries. To further disempower Highlanders, laws removed their right to own arms and wear traditional clothing like the kilt and tartan. The Scottish Enlightenment influenced public opinion, promoting ways to improve people and the land. In short, those who were unenlightened were deemed unreasonable and required either improvement or removal. All because the Jacobites couldn't pack it in after the 4th time. Their greed sickens me. The clearences are generally regarded as having come in a series of waves whose nature and circumstances varied according to when they happened and where they happened and who was involved. George Granville Levinson Gower, later Duke of Sutherland, for instance, was the catalyst for the notorious evictions that took place from 1810 to 1820. Advised that his interior lands were best suited for sheep raising and were little fit for humans, he evicted thousands of families, burning their cottages and building thousands of sheep farms. The evictees were resettled in coastal crofts, where they were forced to subsist by collecting and smelting kelp, a real thing, for the potass and iodine, an occupation which was foreign to them. Other landowners in the Highlands followed that eviction model, though some focused on rearing cattle instead of sheep. Between 1811 and 1821, around 15,000 were removed from the land owned by the Duchess of Sutherland and her husband, the Marquis of Stafford, to make room for 200,000 sheep. Some of those turned out had literally nowhere to go, and many were old and the infirm, and so starved or froze to death, and overall died to the elements. In 1814, 2 elderly people who did not get out of their cottage in time were burned alive in Strathna. In 1826, the Isle of Rum was cleared of its tenants who were paid to go to Canada. Travelling on the ship James to dock at Halifax, unfortunately, every one of the passengers had contracted syphilis by the time they arrived in Canada. This transportation was not that uncommon, as it was often cheaper for landowners to pay passage for the New World than to try and find the tenants other land or keep them from starvation. However, it wasn't always voluntary. The decline in the kelp industry and falling cattle prices and later the potato famine in the Highlands, yes, we had that too, were major blows to the economy of the crofters. When the potato blight hit about 1846, the crofters were financially devastated and disease and starvation began to spread. Mass migrations occurred mainly to the Scottish lowlands, Canada, the USA or Australia. Often Highlanders departed as indentured servants. Some left of their own free will. Some were paid by the landowners, who preferred to finance their immigration rather than actually give them compensation. In 1851, 1,500 tenants in Barra were tricked to a meeting about land rents. They were overpowered, tied up and forced onto ships to the Americas. In 1883, in response to growing sympathy for the plight of the crofters, the Napier Commission was established to investigate their condition. In the meantime, the Highland Land Reform Association, better known as the Land League, was established. Finally, in 1886, the possibility of future evictions were legally eliminated with Parliament's passage of the Crofters Holdings Act, which was grounded on the so-called 3Fs: fair rent, free sale and fixity of tenure. This clearing of the population is the main contributor to the massive worldwide Scottish diaspora and why so many Americans and Canadians can trace their ancestry to the proud and ancient clans of Scotland and this shithole. It's not known exactly how many Highlanders emigrated, or voluntary or otherwise, but estimates put it at 70,000. Whatever the exact figure is, it is enough to change the character and culture of the Scottish Highlands forever. And that is overall a brief and simplified explanation of the Highland clearences. This is quite a large part of Scottish history as a massive injustice by the English, but it's important to remember and have nuance in these situations, and that majority of the landlords who evicted the Highlanders were actually Scottish. This anti-English sentiment can actually be mainly attributed to the Duke of Sutherland, who was actually English, and this is because he was the most well-known landlord who took part in the clearances. But that doesn't take away from this dark part of Scottish history that was mainly did to us by ourselves. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.
That's my job. That's my job. That's my job.